Welcome to the latest edition of Key Titles, Title Corner. So glad to have one of our local attorneys, Keisha Harris, with us today. Thank you so much for joining us, Keisha. We thought we would just have a casual conversation and talk a little bit about Keisha, her business, and a few things that agents could be considering and looking for in order to stay ahead of potential issues. And Keisha, again, thank you so much for coming. Would you mind maybe telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you for having me. So my name's Keisha Arnette Harris. I have owned Arnette Law for, 11 years now. It's crazy flying by. I've practiced for going on 17 years now, which is crazy. So our main office is in Morrisville. We've got a couple of attorneys there. Tempest Morton is one of them. We only focus on real estate. That's all we've ever done. It's what I started in. It's what I've loved. And what we've just continued to grow in throughout the years. So I think one of the biggest things about our office, though, is just working with agents and being a resource for agents has been something that we've always really prided ourselves on and really tried to do. So if I had to sum up our office in a little bit, that'd probably be the way that I would do it.
That's wonderful. I know we really encourage the agents to find an attorney that they can use as their go-to attorney. Okay. That relationship is so important and so valuable. And we have agents reach out to us with questions, and we help from a title perspective, but we always let them know it's always best to have that relationship with an attorney that you can go to for a legal opinion. I know one of the things that we've been asked a lot about recently, and I've mentioned it in previous meetings, was the estate issues or estate matters. We know that comes up a lot.
It does.
And so what I think one of the things that the agents would really love to know is maybe some things that they can do to work proactively, maybe at the time that they are listing the property, maybe questions they could ask, or, if you could maybe tell us, who typically needs to sign and that sort of thing, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, for sure. Probably one of the biggest issues we see is who's going to sign, right? You're sitting on the couch. Whose signature do you get on the listing agreement? Who actually needs to be listed down? And we see a lot of estate of John Doe. And it's really not likely that would be your seller. More than likely, the heirs of John Doe are going to be your seller. So that's who we would be listing on the listing agreement. That's going to be the owner of the property. That's going to be your seller and your signer. So it's really unusual that you should be listing estate of. If you are, probably step back and just ask a couple of more questions. If you did and it's wrong, the closing attorney is usually going to send you an email and say, hey, I think we've probably got the wrong person listed here. We need so-and-so. So that's kind of first step to think about. Second question would be, is there a will? If there is a will, who was the property left to? And those people would be the ones that would be listed down as your seller, whether that be the kids or the wife or whoever who actually inherited the property from the person that was deceased. We always get the question of whether or not their spouses need to sign, and we always recommend that you go ahead and get their signature, just because you know that you've had a conversation with them, you know that they're available, you know that they're willing to sign, and it takes away from surprises that can happen later down the line. So we always recommend going ahead and getting the spouse's signature as well. If there was no will, then you would just be asking who their heirs were. You'd kind of be doing a family tree with that person. So were they married? Okay. And did they have children? Okay. So that would be your sellers. You don't have to go any further than their children, as long as if they had children. If they were not married, had no children, then probably just pick up the phone and call your closing attorney that you work with and kind of walk through the rest of that information with them. But those are probably that's the best place to start. Did they have a will? Yes. What did the will say? And if they didn't, then kind of walk through that family tree and let that guide you.
That makes sense. So at the time of listing, what are some questions that they could maybe ask the seller in order to, I heard you say, is there a will? Mm-hmm. That would be a great question. Yep. Would there be any other questions that would be good for them to ask at the time that they are getting the listing executed? And who would need to sign the listing agreement? Was would that be the same parties that you mentioned earlier?
Yes. So that would be the same parties. If they had that will, have you seen a copy of it? Do you know who the property was left to? And whoever you're talking to is probably the person that it was left to. But also a great question to ask, is there anyone else that the property was left to, or was it just to you? And then if they did not have a will, walking through that family tree and kind of asking, were they married? Did they have children? If they didn't have children, did they have siblings? Kind of just walking through their family tree. If you get too deep into that, closing attorney. I've seen on like social media, like when you're out on a date, you ask someone like, is there anyone that would mind if you're out on this date? It's kind of the same thing. Is there anyone that's going to be bothered that you're selling this property? Is there another area you're not mentioning? Could be an uncomfortable conversation, but that's kind of the question that you may want to ask. Is there someone else? I know that you're an heir, but is there anyone else we need to be talking to or that would need to sign this as a seller?
That makes sense. And then I know another thing we hear is about the power of attorneys. So I know sometimes sellers will say that, we've got a power of attorney. Could you talk a little bit about power of attorneys around estates and maybe some things that you've seen?
Yeah. So we every now and then we get a question about whether or not a power of attorney is still valid after someone has passed away. And of course, the answer to that is no. You would no longer be using a power of attorney once someone has passed away. But if you have a power of attorney for someone else, you can, sign the listing agreement for them. You just want to make sure that it's valid, it's effective for the time that it's being signed, and that person is aware of what's happening. So even though you have a power of attorney, does this person know that you're signing on their behalf? Are they okay with this transaction? Are always good questions to ask.
That's great. I know that will be helpful. Another thing that comes up quite a bit is earnest money deposits and just escrow deposits in general. And I know one of the questions was the difference between earnest money deposit and maybe escrow. And so maybe you could talk a little bit about that too, and how your office handles those types of monies.
Yeah, definitely. Earnest money is making a comeback. We haven't seen it the last couple of years with the market that we've had, but we're seeing more and more of it again. Our office actually has a system called ZOCAM for our earnest money. So it's the same way that you would make a mobile deposit on your phone. You can actually download the app called ZOCAM. You put in the contract information, really basic, buyer, seller, agent, and you can just snap a picture of the earnest money check, and it deposits it directly to us, directly to our trust account. The amazing thing about it is you can do it at night. You can do it on the weekend. You can call your buyer and say, hey, you've got the house. Now deposit the earnest money, and they can just go to the app and do it. So the agent can kind of take that away from something they have to do, and the buyer can just do it themselves. So it's awesome. One also really good thing about it is the agent doesn't have to have the check. So if they've gone under contract and you're not with them, you don't have to physically get that check since they can download it and do it themselves. So I think it makes it really, really convenient.
That's nice. Then the check doesn't get lost.
Yep,
and
doesn't
travels.
get lost for sure, and that happens even with FedEx. We've had FedEx lose checks every now and then, so it doesn't get lost. You don't have to go to where they are since you can sign the contract electronically. They can deposit the earnest money. It's kind of all taken care of, easy peasy.
That's wonderful. That's so good. And it is about ease of doing business. And I know, again, that's another wonderful thing about having your go-to attorney. If you're doing that type of work where you're having someone take images of checks, if you work almost exclusively with that attorney, it's good to have that relationship. And, if anything ever came up, you would know how to follow up on that.
Yeah. Well, and it lets agents do what they're good at, do what they need to do, right? Go, you're lead generating, you're getting the rest of the contract underway, you're scheduling inspections, so you're not chasing checks and delivering checks and mailing checks and worrying about that. It kind of takes it out of your hands and frees up your time again to do what you need to do.
That's wonderful. I know there have been a few podcasts that I've done where I've been talking a little bit about remote online notary, and that hasn't really come to fruition.
Yeah.
But I know that there are other types of things that are being done, like hybrid closings, and there's mail-aways in some situations. Are you seeing many of those? Or, with when you have people that are from out of state, like how do you typically handle those types of transactions now?
Oh my gosh, we have seen such an increase in the last couple of years with COVID with mail-away transactions. It's just been unreal, especially the heyday beginning of COVID. with the buyers that just couldn't travel here, weren't able to travel here, couldn't take off work. So we've really streamlined that process, and I think just gotten it down really well at this point. So for us, we have a notary system that we really can schedule a notary in any place. There's really not been a place that we've run into that we've had an issue. And the notary would go to the buyer wherever they are. We just need a place to meet you and the time. It's usually the buyer's current house, wherever they are. They would take all of the documents to the buyer. They would sign with the buyer, make sure everything's correct, overnight, and then overnight it back to us. So they take the docs back, overnight everything, and then we receive them the next day for funding and recording. It really streamlines the process. It takes the guesswork out of it. It takes the buyer having to find their own notary out of it. What time FedEx drop-off is. It eliminates honestly, it just takes kind of the problems that we had previously had out of the equation, since we've got someone that does this on a daily basis, still kind of in control of it for the buyer. They just need to be in that designated location at that time with their driver's license, and it works really well. Biggest issue we've seen with that is just the scheduling of it. So if the contract says that closing is going to be today, the 12th, okay, is that the day that the buyer is signing? And if it is, that means recording is going to be tomorrow, the 13th. So, and is the seller expecting to sell or buy on the same day that they're selling? And it just kind of creates a few questions there. Mm-hmm. So one big thing that you want to think about if you've got a buyer that's not physically going to be here and is going to sign remotely is, okay, let's make sure we've notified everyone, we've communicated with everyone. Can the lender maybe date for the day before so that we're signing the day before and we're still recording and dispersing on the actual closing date? And that really plays a big part. So just that communication, as always, is really important.
That's great. And that also helps so much with agents that may be listening to this that may not be in your immediate area. They might be in one of the, bedroom communities. That would be a great opportunity for them to still work with you. Yes. So that's wonderful. Another thing, too, was I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about new construction. I know you do quite a bit with builders. And so I thought maybe you could talk a little bit about what you're seeing around new construction, maybe what, the types of transactions that are happening right now, or maybe just talk a little bit about what's going on with builders.
New construction we've seen a lot of, as everyone knows, just with the market and how difficult resales have been. New construction's really taken a place here in our market. We've seen a lot of custom building, and that's probably where we get most of our questions from. The bigger builders, we get a lot of contractual questions, but there's just not a lot of room in those contracts to really wiggle with. Those builders really have put what they want to put in there, and they're not really willing to negotiate as far as the language of their contract and changing the terms. So it's the custom part that we really work with more, the smaller builder, and that's been in the news lately. We've seen some builders that are just not having the best time recently. So if you're working with a buyer that's looking at a custom builder, you really want to maybe investigate that builder a little bit. For the agents that we work with, we've opened our office up. Call us if you've got a buyer considering a local builder. Let us run a judgment check. It takes a minute on our behalf, and we can tell you if there's one or two things out there or if there's 3 pages of judgments. And if you've got a builder that's building up some judgments, you can tell that maybe they're not doing well, or at least gives you some questions to ask them. So again, it goes back to having that relationship, having someone you can call before your clients have even gone under contract, and have that conversation and ask them to just do a 30-second quick take a look and see how that builder's actually doing in the market right now.
That is an awesome value-added service.
Yeah.
And for the agent to be able to reach out to you with something like that, I think is extremely valuable. And I don't think that they always think about stuff like that. You have reputable people in the business that have been around a long time. And so it's wonderful to just do that last minute check.
Yeah.
Well, I really do appreciate your time and coming out today. I feel like our conversation has gone really well. And I didn't know if there was anything else that you might want to mention before we wrap up.
I think we've really hit on everything. It's really, I think the common theme through all of this is having someone you can call, having someone you can have a conversation with, that you don't ever feel like you're bothering them. You can just pick up the phone, and a lot of issues can be solved just by talking through them with someone. So stop beating your head against a wall. Stop trying to have it to yourself. Call someone and have that conversation with them. And I think a lot of the issues that agents have if they have that communication, if they have that person on their team, they can always try to get to the finish line.
Very good. Well, I highly recommend that they add you to their team. And thank you again so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.